first-degree murder indictment against Carmelo Anthony, which they did.
Our family has been under attack.
What if the grieving parents the world rallied around weren't victims at all, but the masterminds behind something darker than anyone imagined? What if the very faces of heartbreak, the people clutching photos of their son and crying out for justice, were quietly pulling the strings of betrayal, manipulation, and possibly even murder? This story isn't just about a young life cut short. It's about what unfolded in the shadows. Money moving like whispers in the dark, texts deleted but never erased, and a community forced to reckon with the idea that compassion itself had been weaponized. At the center of it all was Carmelo Anthony, a name that echoed through headlines and courtrooms. But the deeper truth wasn't just about him. It was about the parents who stood behind him and how far they were willing to go in pursuit of something unthinkable. Austin Metcalf was only 18 when everything was stolen from him. Friends described him as the type of person who could light up a room with nothing more than a smile. He had dreams, ambitions, and the kind of energy that made people believe he was destined for more. His sudden and violent death shattered his family, his school, and his entire community. It should have been the story of one young man's tragic end and the quest for justice. Instead, it became a web of lies, staged grief and money flowing through hands that should have been clasped in mourning, not greed. Carmelo Anthony, a promising young athlete, was arrested for Austin's death. In that moment, the narrative shifted. Carmelo's parents transformed themselves into the image of devastated guardians fighting a system they claimed was stacked against their son. Cameras caught them crying outside courthouses, clutching photos, giving emotional interviews that painted them as the true victims of injustice. For months, people believed them. And in that belief, they gave more than just sympathy. They gave money. The GoFundMe campaign launched just days after Carmelo's arrest. $10 million. That was the target, dressed up in carefully crafted words about fighting for justice, healing a broken community, and saving a son from a system eager to condemn him. The campaign went viral. People across the country and eventually across the world opened their wallets. Some skipped paying bills just to send $20 they couldn't spare. Others pulled from savings, convinced their generosity would help a grieving family. Strangers who never met Carmelo or Austin left long, heartfelt messages with their donations. The parents read those words aloud on live streams, tears streaking their faces, their voices cracking with gratitude. It was a masterclass in performance, and people bought into it wholeheartedly. But behind the curtain, something entirely different was happening. The money didn't stay where donors thought it would. Within hours of the first donations, funds began vanishing into places that had nothing to do with lawyers or legal defense. Prosecutors later laid out the timeline in chilling detail. Day 1, Carmelo is arrested. Day 2, the GoFundMe goes live, cloaked in emotional language. Day 3, $250,000 is transferred, not to a defense fund, but to a mysterious man who, according to investigators, was seen near the stadium on the night Austin died. This wasn't just financial mismanagement. This was a money trail that pointed toward something much more sinister. The courtroom gasped when the evidence was displayed. Even those who had once defended the Anani family fell silent. This wasn't grief. This was control. The transfers didn't stop there. $500,000 routed through a Hong Kong processor. Another deposit converted into cryptocurrency, disappearing into anonymous wallets. A payment labeled legal vendor services, but traced back to a yacht rental company. Tens of thousands spent on jewelry. Everything carefully disguised, but when stripped bare by forensic accountants, the picture was clear. The money wasn't being used to defend Carmelo. It was being siphoned into luxuries and hidden accounts. And then came the detail that made the courtroom truly still. $60,000 funneled to a fixer, a man with a reputation not just for covering tracks, but for making people vanish. This was no longer about financial fraud. This was about silencing anyone who might speak the truth about what happened the night Austin was killed. Phone records placed the fixer near the stadium. Deleted text from Carmelo's mother appeared on the projector. "It's all in place. No mistakes now. Call when it's done." The silence in the room after those words appeared wasn't just quiet. It was suffocating. Grainy security footage added yet another layer of unease. Carmelo's father was caught on camera entering a storage unit just 2 days before Austin's death. He stayed inside for nearly an hour, then walked out with a black duffel bag slung over his shoulder. Weeks later, when investigators searched the unit, they found nothing. No fingerprints, no receipts, nothing but a silence that told its own story. For months, the Anani family had stood in front of cameras crying about injustice. And yet here was evidence suggesting they weren't just complicit. They were orchestrating something darker. The donations, the protests, the chants for justice, they weren't about saving a son. They were about funding a cover-up. The betrayal cut deep for the people who had donated. Many had given their last $20, believing they were helping a family survive. Instead, that money was being used to rent yachts, buy jewelry, and potentially pay off people who could have testified. It wasn't just financial fraud, it was emotional fraud. The donors weren't just robbed of money. They were robbed of their compassion, their faith in humanity, and the belief that they were doing something good. And for Austin's family, it was even worse. They weren't just grieving the loss of their son. They were forced to watch his memory turned into currency. As slides flashed across the projector, showing wire transfers, offshore accounts, and shell corporations, Austin's father gripped a photo of his son so tightly it crumpled in his hands. He broke down in sobs, the kind of raw pain that filled every corner of the courtroom. It wasn't just about the knife that took Austin's life. It was about the lie that followed. A second death, a second betrayal. And just when it seemed the courtroom had seen enough, the prosecution called another witness. A former employee of the law firm Carmelo's parents had hired. Nervous, clutching documents, her testimony was the nail in the coffin. She revealed that she was instructed to process urgent retainer payments directly from the GoFundMe account. It wasn't even subtle. Donations meant to fund a legal defense were wired straight to the firm. Internal memos warned about fraud risk. Emails projected on the courtroom wall revealed Carmelo's father writing, "We need to make sure this stays clean. Keep it internal." The warning was ignored. The silence was deliberate. And then came the final gut punch, a $40,000 payment made directly to a private investigator whose only job, prosecutors claimed, was to prevent a key witness from ever speaking to police. That wasn't legal defense. That was witness tampering. That was obstruction. That was chilling. Social media outside the courthouse exploded. The hashtag #AuditTheGoFundMe trended worldwide. Screenshots of transactions circulated. Former supporters turned their backs, publicly apologizing for ever believing the Anani family. Even influencers who had once spoken out in defense of Carmelo's parents now deleted their old posts, their voices replaced with outrage. But none of that mattered to the Medaf family, sitting in the courtroom staring at the evidence. Their pain was carved into their faces. This wasn't just a case anymore. This was the dismantling of an image that had fooled an entire nation. Carmelo's parents, once symbols of resilience, were now exposed as manipulators who had used grief as a mask. The jury sat forward in their seats, each new revelation making disbelief less of an option. The prosecution didn't need to shout. They didn't need theatrics. The evidence spoke louder than any words. Every dollar told a story. Every wire transfer connected dots. Every deleted text message was a whisper from the past, now echoing in a courtroom that had grown colder with each passing hour. By the time the judge adjourned for the day, the room was heavy with the weight of betrayal. The Medaf family left first, quiet but resolute. Their grief hardened into something like fire. Carmelo sat motionless, his parents exchanging a glance that seemed to carry years of secrets. The world outside buzzed with speculation, outrage, disbelief. But inside that chamber, everyone knew they had just witnessed the unmasking of something far darker than a single crime. And that's what makes this story impossible to forget. This wasn't just about one young man's death. It wasn't just about a fundraiser gone wrong. It was about how easily trust can be twisted, how sympathy can be weaponized, and how quickly a family's public image can shift from victim to villain. For the donors, the betrayal was financial, yes, but it was also emotional. Their kindness was exploited, their generosity converted into fuel for something unthinkable. For the Medaf family, the betrayal was deeper. They weren't just forced to bury a son. They were forced to watch his memory become a tool for manipulation. And for everyone else watching, the story serves as a chilling reminder. Sometimes the people who seem most broken are the ones holding the sharpest pieces of glass behind their backs. So remember this story. Don't scroll past it. Don't let it vanish into the endless stream of headlines. Because what happened here isn't just one tragedy. It's a warning about the fragility of trust, about how quickly compassion can be turned into currency, and about the shadows that linger behind carefully crafted tears. Carmelo's parents weren't just grieving, they were planning, and the world for a time believed them. That's what makes this betrayal cut deeper than anything else. It wasn't just about the loss of life, it was about the loss of trust. And that, in the end, is what makes this story haunt everyone who hears it.